The end of the conference. Well, there's a little bit more tomorrow, but it's the end of the Saturday. So we appreciate you guys being here. Today we're going to talk about ways that you can get hired in academic jobs. We've got three panelists here, and what the format that we're going to do is we're going to take somewhat short talks where they give us a little bit of their insight on their own experiences and some work they've done on this, and then we're going to open it up to a panel style with whatever time that we have left. So today we're going to be hearing from Mitch Krosny, Tara Chapman, and Garth Bach.
Thank you. Hi, good afternoon. How many people here are going to be applying for jobs this round, starting in a couple of months? Okay, so a fair number of people. And are other people here interested in learning about this for one day, many years from now? Are you thinking you're on the job market in 2, 3, 4 years maybe? Okay. And are we talking about, raise your hand if you're thinking about an academic job at a traditional college, university? Okay, the majority. All right, interesting. Don't be nervous, it's going to be okay. You're going to get hired. Let me try and offer a few pieces of information about the job talk experience. I've witnessed many job talks, some that have gone really, really well, some that have gone horribly. Mostly the latter were my own job talks. But due to a variety of computer errors, I was lucky to get hired anyway. I'll tell you the way to do much better than I did by offering just a few different examples of things you can be thinking about in order to be successful when you do that all-important job talk. So, when you're doing a job talk, you're really being evaluated, as you know. But what are you being evaluated on? I would say there are a few things you want to think about. One is, are you a good fit for the department? And we'll talk about that in some more detail. Some of this is outside of your control. So it's important to know that from the minute you get there may be people rooting against you. And it's not because of you. It's because there may be ways in which they perceive that there is a fit. There is a mystery candidate out there that will offer a particular area of expertise or will be in a different subspecialty of the field. And this has nothing to do with you whatsoever, but it might impact your job talk experience. So again, we'll talk about that a little bit. You're also being assessed for your teaching skills. Although student evaluations are useful in that regard, and you may have talked about them in your application and your teaching interest statement, they want to see it for themselves. Of course, they are looking at whether you're a good scholar. But of course, if you've been published, then that's how you got the interview in the first place. So that tells most of that story. But mostly, they want to make sure that you can succeed. So if they have probably gotten dozens of applications, and they only have the funding to bring 3 people in most cases, for a job talk. They want to make sure that one of those 3 people gets the job, because in a lot of universities, if they don't fill the job this year, they're not necessarily getting that line next year. So they really, really want you to succeed, especially the search committee chair. And what they want, and once they succeed, they do not want to see you fail in the job and have to go through this all over again in the next couple of years. So they want to make sure that if they hire you, you are going to succeed for the next 40 to 70 years at that department. So some of what they're looking for is to see that not only are you doing a good job now, but your research program has legs. And in now probably just under 6 minutes, I'm going to try and go through each of those things in rapid detail. So before you do the job talk, it is absolutely essential that you call the search committee chair on the phone and you have a conversation about what their expectations and hopes are for your job talk. It is not uncommon that you finish the job talk and someone will say, we were hoping you would talk more about your schizophrenia stuff. You're like, oh, really? That would have been helpful information before I did the talk. So, or something like that. So, you really want to get a sense from them in advance. What are you looking for? How did this position become, how did it open? Where did this line come from? Is there a search vision? So usually what happens is a search committee, before they put an ad out, they say, well, what we'd really like is someone who studies this, or has this background, or has that expertise. And there are likely conflicting visions. They might say, well, we're either looking for someone that meets these criteria, or those criteria. If you had all of them, that'd be great. This is really important information for you to have before you do your talk. Because even if you have a stock talk that you've given at several other universities at this point, you might just emphasize your commentary a little bit to talk about the areas they're looking for. And if you don't know that, then you're really just doing the talk blind. And you have no idea what they're looking for. You have no idea how what you're saying is going to land on them. Remember, the search committee chair is rooting for you. So they will be happy to give you this information and happy to even help you along in thinking about what aspects of your work to emphasize. So you could say, well, I have some early childhood stuff, I have some adolescent stuff, I recently did a GERO study. Do you get the sense that any of those would be of particular interest for the faculty to hear about? And they can say, yeah, actually we already have 10 GERO faculty, so we want to hear about your child stuff. Great, thank you, that's helpful. And that will really gear the organization of your talk. So of course, when you do a job talk, it can be really boring or it can be really compelling. And if it's the former, then they're going to assume that that's the way you are as a teacher, as a mentor, and as a general person in all of your relationships. So you want to try and give a talk that follows the basic rules of public speaking, which I probably do not need to go into here, but I'll mention a couple of my own quick pet peeves that are good to stay away from when you're giving a job talk. And in particular, you want to make sure, of course, that you're being engaging, and not just socially engaging, but you're also making connections with the other faculty. You want to show that you've done your homework, you want to show that your research connects, but doesn't overlap so much that you're redundant with another faculty member. So make the connection parenthetically briefly, and then go on. You definitely want to be clear as well. You don't want to put so much text on your slides. When you put a lot of text on your slides, it turns out that people really end up just reading the text and they're not really listening to you at all. So here's an example where you could start talking about your summer vacation, where you went, and no one cares, no one's listening, because really all they're doing is reading the text. And that doesn't really speak well for you or for them, and everyone becomes bored. One person got it, touch the next. Good, okay. Remember, don't go crazy with animations. You want to remember, of course, just basic speaking skills that you are giving a professional talk, and while it might be nice to have a slick, cool-looking presentation, which is fine, you're really looking at the content. So if you find yourself spending a lot of time trying to make the slides look pretty, but they're already clear and fine, then that's enough. It actually can get quite distracting. And don't put up a slide that looks like a mess and then say, oh, I'm sorry, this is a horrible slide, I know. Then don't put it up. If you're going to do something and you do have a concern about that, you might put it up and say, I'd really like you to pay attention to the line that doesn't show a linear trend here. You know, or, no, I mean, seriously, you might say, I really want you to notice the red lines, or I want you to notice this, or you might have a way of coming up with an animation, or with a focus zoom, or something like that. But don't put up a big mess. People are usually listening to a topic that is not in their own interest area, so it's hard enough to follow along sometimes a new area. You don't want to overwhelm them with complicated stuff. Make it simple. You're not going to impress anybody by how much data you have. You're going to impress people by how clear and compelling you are when you talk about research. When you're thinking about how do you come across as a good scholar, remember, even if your research experiences have not truly been that programmatic, because you ended up having unique opportunities or serendipitous experiences, advisors left or came or funding disappeared, there's probably still something about your work where there's a common through line, there's a unique thread to the stuff that you've done. We'll talk about that in a second, how to put together that program and how to put together the organization. But basically, it would be good if you do set this up like you would think of a movie plot. You're going to establish the problem, indicate where the limitations are, indicate the need, the issue, get people invested in the topic. Then you're going to discuss what's out there and why what you have found is good or it's started to get there. And then the solution is you need to hire me and I'm going to do all the great work and I'm going to solve this whole problem for the field. So you want a momentum to the talk. You don't want to put your best stuff in the first couple slides. And you don't want to save it until the very last slide when you're out of time and you have to race through it. You want to time that to be kind of 2/3 through the talk. You want to put your best material. Because that's the rhythm we're all used to, and that's the best narrative to give to keep an entire hour-long presentation compelling for that whole length of time. There are a number of different formats that you might choose from. The novice will come up, this is very common if you're just finishing postdoc, and they'll really present a single study. it might be their dissertation, and they really talk about their research in terms of the intro, methods, results, discussions, limitations, future directions. That's it. And that's not the best way to do a job talk, but some people might not have a lot of research experience yet, and that is a fine approach. Notice, by the way, that this follows the same movie narrative that we talked about before. And the results section is kind of that. I have some solutions here. I have some answers. But a lot of people, if you have really, really programmatic research, you might have what I call the train car, which is that you say, well, I'm going to talk about a study, and that study ended with this question. My very next study picked up on that question and answered it, but that led to another question. And it's almost as if the studies begin and end beautifully into each other. If you can do that, great, fantastic. Most people's research is not that programmatic, and that's probably not the case very early in your career. That is sometimes more frequently done later in a career. But if you've seen those kinds of talks, that is one way to put together disparate studies and pieces and interests, if it can fit that way. But most of us kind of have more of a pinwheel design in that there may be some general central theory of interest. And then you say, I kind of looked at that in a variety of different ways. There was this way, and then come back. And then there was that way, and then let's go back to that central idea. And then there's this whole other line that I took it. And you're really talking about everything is revolving around one central idea. And this is where you can take that non-programmatic seeming research program and tie it all together in a way that feels like, yeah, I can see a lot more parts of this for the next 7 years on this job. So that's good. I know I'm over, so I'm going to try and go a little bit quickly. So for instance, you might say, I'm generally interested in treatment efficacy moderators. And I initially had done just an observational study about what parent factors correlate with conduct disorder. I later realized that might be useful for doing an open trial of motivational interviewing. I then did some work on therapist IMH. These are all different, but they all generally have to do with how different factors might moderate treatment efficacy. And they sound like they're all different topics, but you unify them like this. Of course, one of the best ways that you can do it, if your research lends itself to this, is to provide an overall model and do more of a model-based job talk, where you're kind of saying, I believe that, let's say you're studying autism, I believe that some of the factors that play into the central deficits we see in autism are related in this very big way with all of these different possible constructs that might mediate and moderate each other. This is what I hope to study for many, many decades. What I'm starting with, though, on this first study is just looking at one of those associations. And then I started to integrate another association. But again, this approach of organizing the talk demonstrates that you have a bigger picture to tell, a bigger story to tell, even though the research you're showing are just little snippets of that picture so far, of that story so far. And that, again, really demonstrates that you have legs to your research program and you've thought about the overall picture. So that's a good idea to do. Remember that you do not have to mention all of your studies in equal levels of detail. It's perfectly fine just to jump straight to the cool results graph on some of these. And just say, let me just get to the point, this involved 3,000 individuals, and here are the findings. And just stick it up there. And if people have questions about what methods, then they'll ask you in the Q&A. But really, you want to show the breadth of your work, and you want to show that program and that big picture. Even that means that you're shortchanging some of the studies. Again, you can talk about studies that you were not the PI on, that your advisor was. Just discuss it with them first, make sure they feel comfortable with you presenting that as work that is part of your talk. And of course, you might want to cite them on the bottom or something like that, like, oh, this was done by some big shot, whatever, blah, 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 and then also made 2014. So it is fair in referencing, I was part of this work, I'm not claiming things to my own, but I was part of it, it's part of what I've done. So it is okay to include that as long as your advisor is cool with that. Remember that the Q&A is half the battle. So when you're done with the job talk, it doesn't matter whether you did a great job or not a great job. Some of the job talks live and die by the Q&A. And in the Q&A, what they're trying to figure out is this your work or was this your advisor's work? So if in the Q&A you're like, oh, I don't know, that's just the way it came out, so whatever. I'll have to ask my advisor why I didn't test for that. Well, that's an obvious sign that you don't know what you're talking about, right? So does this work seem publishable and where? Can you respond to review and comments, even in the Q&A? Can you say, yeah, I thought about that, and actually it's not that, so you're wrong, or in a nice way. How will this program grow to make sure you're going to be able to get tenure? Is this work fundable? It might be nice to even talk about that right at the job talk. I see this as getting turned into a grant that I think would match the priorities of NSF. Say that. They want to know that. Will students want to work with you? Are you defensive, unapproachable, stubborn in the Q&A? Or does it seem like, wow, that's fascinating, what a great idea, I'd love to do that study. That's someone that's going to do well working with students, and that's what they're looking for in the Q&A a little bit. And also, if you're saying, well, all I do is analyze secondary data from this great data set my advisor had, and they're going to say, what are students going to do working with you? Sit next to you while you run SPSS? No, are they going to go out and actually learn skills of their own? So talk about original data collections that you're going to do, and students will be in the room, and they will be excited if they say, I would love to get that training. They influence this job process a lot. I'm way over time, so I'm just going to stop and just quickly mention again, the Q&A is really also about thinking on your feet and just making sure you don't have a raging access to disorder. So it is important, that you are remembering you are on all the time, and even if someone asks a question that seems ridiculous, answer it in a genuine, respectful way, and everyone will appreciate that you took the high road rather than kind of blowing it off a little bit or mocking it. And I've seen that happen. And then people that actually end up reflecting poorly on you, even if everyone thought the question was indeed a stupid question. So be careful about that. And of course, it is perfectly fine to say, I don't know, further research is needed. Because that's what you're there for, is to do that work. So I hope that's helpful. Last note, if you notice that after the job talk, everyone starts to be wooing you more than before the job talk, that means it went really well. And usually what happens is that after the job talk, people stop asking you questions, and people start instead trying to sell you on the place. So when that happens, you know that the job talk is going well, and if you have the choice, schedule the job talk as early as you can in your 2-day visit, because then you get to spend the rest of the time relaxed, and it's a much better experience for everybody. Okay, I'm really done now. Okay.
Hello, my name is Garth Fowl. I'm the Associate Executive Director for Graduate and Postgraduate Education. And I have a very different career path in academia, so I thought I'd tell you a little bit about that and then tell you what I learned and how that got me into not only my position in academia, but how I got here at the UK. So to start off with, very traditional, I have a undergraduate degree in psychology. I'm a behavioral neuroscientist. I do all this vision and motor planning research. As a graduate student, so there was one thing though that got me really interested, and I think this is important. It's like in addition to my research, there's things that get you intrigued and get you interested in addition to your research, but also that bring you to a department. So remember, they're not just, I love Mitch's talk because he was talking about how they're looking to get you on, they're looking to see as your research fundable, but they're also looking for colleagues, people that they're going to want to interact with, people that they're going to share experiences with, and they want people, or at least in my department when we were hiring people, we wanted people that showed an enthusiasm or a breadth or an idea of how this could, where else I could go, or your enthusiasm for teaching, and they wanted to see other things that got involved, how you can get involved. And so this is some interesting data that I started looking at when I was a graduate student about career outcomes. And so actually, I eventually switched and became a career outcome expert, despite my basic training, and that's how I got my job in almost all the other positions in academia, right? So we have all this data from the NSF, and I just was showing you that it's kind of sad, right? Looking at the STEM stuff, and so I started getting really involved in this, and I started doing all these questions, and I started going to NSF, and started asking my faculty, so these are more questions and things that we see coming from these NSF reports. And I remember going to my faculty saying, well, I want to know, what about these other people that have these PhDs, and what kind of jobs and what kind of work are they going to do, and where do they find themselves? And if they're not you, they're not in your position, senior faculty, professor, so-and-so, but they have these PhDs and they're doing research, where are they going? And the response I got, maybe some of you sometimes get this, was, I don't know. Has anyone ever asked, or you go and ask your faculty, what do other people do? And they said, I don't know. In fact, two of my mentors said, and I love them both, I don't know how to do any of that. I came here as a postdoc, and this is true. She goes, and when you're done, so please hurry up, I will retire. I've never left this institution. I don't know how to do anything else, but I will teach you how to go out and learn about these other things if you want to do that. And then the chair of my department, when I came and said the same thing, can you help us learn this? She said, I don't know how to do that either, but I'll fund it. I'll give you the money, you go find people to come and teach you that. So my friends and I co-founded this, what can you do with a PhD in biological sciences? We started bringing people into the department, we started having national talks, we started going all over the place. That was in addition to doing all the other research that I did, my postdoc, my undergrad college. And I think that's key, right? Still did all my research, I was still getting out there and running my studies, I was going out to conferences and talking, but I was also doing this as much as I could on the side. I went and did my postdoc, visual attention processing. I chose this off because at the time it paid the highest, which I think was a really bad idea sometimes in terms of career planning, but that's what ended up. Did basic research, but I still stayed involved with these questions. I still went to NSF presentations. I still spoke to organizations. I kept up on the research on what's happening in career professional training, and it came time for a job talk. And I always wanted to go to a small college, so I got an interview and a job offer from a small college, and I was going to start my research project, and I was going to be a faculty member. And at the same time, Science Magazine called me and said, we've heard that you're doing all this research on graduate education and training, you're pilfering through the NSF stuff, we'd like to have you come do a job talk for us. So this unforeseen opportunity from my excitement and from applying the skills I had in a very different field led to an opportunity for me to get a new job or to go in somewhere else. So I went, I did the interview, I interviewed at both places and was really decided, wasn't sure what I wanted to do. And I ended up going to Science Magazine, and I became their program associate for the Science Careers Program. And what that did is it gave me an opportunity. I kind of saw it as a second postdoc. I went out there, I collected more data, I started doing presentations and workshops, I started writing papers. I also networked. I networked exclusively, and I think this is a big secret about what you're passionate about, the people you run to, and the way you talk about it. I got to meet with the directors at NIH, NSF, the National Institutes of Science and Technology Standards, the Department of Education, the Department of Defense, the Rural Development Fund, Howard Hughes Medical Institute, the Leukemia Lymphoma Society. I just don't know all these people. These are still people I see on a regular basis, but they remember me when they say, you were so young and wet behind the ears, but you were passionate and excited, and you applied your knowledge to this question that was really important. I met with deans and chairs, I developed seminars, and I networked, and I networked, and I networked. And then one day there came an opportunity where the networking paid off, and someone called and said, they're looking for a faculty member, an administrative faculty member at Northwestern University. Switch, I went to the Department of Neurobiology, but it's very behavioral oriented, so I ended up going there. I was in charge of the day-to-day management of the entire department, so I developed these strong administrative skills. I taught undergraduate courses, I directed their service, their master's program. I got totally involved in administrative service. I was on search committees for vice presidents. I ran undergraduate dorms. I really got involved in what was to be there again in the academic environment, but I still stayed involved in this graduate education and training. I still went and gave talks wherever I could. I found after a while that the increasing responsibility that I was going to receive in this job kind of was peaking out. I spent almost 6 years, and by the third or fourth year, I was kind of doing the same thing repeatedly, and I wanted to look for something new. And so then there was the opportunity here, again, through networking and for talking to friends, that there came a job opportunity at the APA. And I'm now the Associate Executive Director for Education at the APA. I do all kinds of management work, I do all kinds of large strategic work, but I still work very closely with academic administrators, faculty, trainers, the people that train you on what are great policies, what are procedures, what are best practices, what are the career outcomes. I do workforce analyses, and I still engage in this kind of scientific research about something that I'm really passionate about, and I think that's a key aspect. How do I harness big cloud technology and data to try and figure out how many of you guys will we need in 15 years, 20 years, 30 years, those types of questions. So, when I think about how to be strategic, that was the title of the talk and what we were looking for, I was really thinking you've got to understand what you're passionate about, and then you have to be able to understand or apply those skill sets that you learned and establish the people that you want to be a colleague with them in that field. And I can answer more questions, and I also have tons more data about this post-baccalaureate education and training that we could go through and where things are going and all that other stuff. But I think the idea what I wanted to show here was if you're excited, you have passion, and you can show how you'll apply your knowledge that you've gathered and gained. There's lots of opportunities in different aspects of that.
So my name is Tara Chaplin, and I'm an assistant professor in psychology at George Mason University. And I was asked to talk here, I think, to give a little bit of a case study of how my path to getting a tenure-track job in a psychology department, and to give some advice that I wish that I had taken along the way that might help you guys in your search. And I'm going to keep this quick again so that we can have lots of questions. So, my path. Where's the focus? So my story is that I received a PhD in child clinical psychology from Penn State in 2003. Keep that date in mind. That was a while ago. My research interests are in emotion and developmental psychopathology. And so my goal when I was getting the PhD was to obtain a tenure-track position in a psychology department. Probably more of a research-focused psychology department. Okay. So I did get that position, but it wasn't until 2013 that I got the position at George Mason University. So I just got this position about a year ago. So this is pretty much going to be the story of what happened in those 10 years between 2003 to 2013 and how I ended up on this path. So I'm going to sort of go through the 3 stages of my career in a timeline form and then give a piece of advice that I learned from each stage. So the first stage was getting a PhD. So this is sort of before the timeline. But what happened was I ended up getting my PhD, lots of great training, but unfortunately I got out of it with no publications. I had a few things under review, but nothing published. This is a big problem. So obviously you guys won't have this problem, but you also don't want to get out of your PhD with few first author publications. So my advice to you, if you're still a graduate student or a postdoc, is to just publish as much as you can. And go ahead and submit papers even if you feel like they're not completely finished. Because, as Mitch pointed out, and I think other folks, obviously this is sort of an obvious point, but that you're going to be evaluated on your ability to do science, and the search committee can't evaluate your ability if you haven't demonstrated that you can publish in your field. And when I got out of my PhD, my plan was to do a postdoc for 2 years and publish all that work that I've been working on. But you never know when a job opportunity might come up. And there actually was a job opportunity at a great university that was hiring in my field that year in 2003. And I met with the department chair on unrelated business, and he was like, wow, Tara, you're really great for this position, but I can't interview you because you have no qualifications. So lesson 1, publish a lot as a graduate student. So, okay, I didn't get that position, but I did my postdoc. So I arranged for sort of an unofficial postdoc on soft money on a grant at Penn that Jane Gillen was the PI on. And so that's sort of a whole other story, how do you arrange for those postdocs. But anyway, I somehow made an arrangement to have a couple of years as a postdoc at Penn where I could write more papers. The interesting thing about that postdoc was that at the time, with fresh for my PhD, I was convinced that I was only interested in the development of adolescent depression. And I was not that interested in randomized controlled trials or intervention work. But the postdoc was mostly to work on an R01 on an intervention trial. And what I realized after being there for a few years is that it actually was really interesting work, and I really got into it. And fast forward 9 years later, and I actually applied for a grant to do a randomized control trial of an intervention. And had I not had that experience as a postdoc and seeing an RCT being done, I would never be qualified to get that grant. But I did get the grant, largely because of everything I learned on my postdoc. So my second piece of advice is have a program of research, for sure, like Mitch was saying. Have a story to your research. but it's a great idea to be open to gaining new skills, especially when you're on postdoc. So be open to learning about what your advisor, what new skills they might have that you can add to your program of research. So this talk is all about me being stubborn, I think. All right, so then what happened was I'd been at postdoc for 3 years. I was like, great, I'm gonna do a job search. Unfortunately, at that time, I had also gotten engaged to my husband. And so, yeah, well, so that's my third tip is don't have a partner. Have a national search. Yeah, but I couldn't apply national. The best thing is to apply nationally to lots of different universities and have all these options. I could only apply to very few universities in cities where my husband could work. So my job search basically failed. I did get a job offer, but it wasn't the right fit for me. So that was okay. But my husband did great in that job search, and he got a fantastic job in Connecticut. So I ended up following him to Connecticut with the plan of staying there for about 6 years, and then I would apply again. And that happens sometimes when you have a partner. So some advice that I have, if you are geographically limited because of a partner, because of family obligations or whatever, you might want to consider non-sort of academic institutions where you can do a lot of great research. Now, Garth would know a lot about those, so I'm going to leave that open to you for question and answer, what they all are. For me, a good solution was to go to a med school. So I went to the Department of Psychiatry at Yale. And at Yale, basically, they'll take you as a faculty member as long as you can get grants, which was great for me because I loved writing grants, and that was not a huge problem. It took a little while to learn. But I just kept getting grants and stayed there for a while. So started there as a postdoc, promoted to research scientist, and then I was promoted to assistant professor at Yale. And that's where, I guess the lesson in this stage of my career is sort of a weird one to explain. But the thing that I learned was that even though I really wanted a job in a psychology department, and that's where I am now, I wanted a tenure track job, I also kind of made peace that I'm in a psychiatry department, and this is great. I have the opportunity to do lots of cutting edge research, and I decided to just go ahead and commit full throttle to it and write lots of grants and get involved in lots of research. And I'm really glad that I did. So if you end up somewhere because of geography that you might not have been your first choice, I think it's better for you to go ahead and excel where you are, rather than being like, well, I'm just going to wait for next year on the job market. Because it's my sense that one of the reasons that I was hired when I did go on the job market in 2013 was that they saw me not as someone who was just sort of, going along and doing okay at Yale, but someone who was excelling and had a lot going on and was doing well there, but decided to leave. So I guess that's my other piece of advice, is that even if you don't love where you are for the moment, it's a good idea to just push through it and do the best work that you can. Because there are a lot of places outside of a traditional psychology department where you could do really great research and really great work, and I would be happy if I was still there in some ways. Okay, so then I finally got a job, so that's the end of my story, and I think that's it. My last piece of advice is to find really great mentors, which is easier said than done, but I've had some amazing people who really supported my career, and I couldn't have done it without their advice. So thank you to them. Thank you.
Thank you all. At this point, we've got about 15 minutes left for our panel. So can people in the back, can you guys hear us okay? Okay, so we have a few questions that we prepared, and we're going to ask the speakers, and they'll each provide whatever insight they have. And if you guys have a question, this is kind of a conversation. So if you have a question, feel free to raise your hand and join in, and we'll field questions as we get them. The first question that we wanted to ask you guys is, so we talked a lot about the job talk itself. Obviously, grants, institution, what's the different weight for factors that there are a number of factors that take place during the job interview weekend or 2 days of class. How do different departments weight those factors?
I would say for one called Research One or Doctoral Training Institution. It has a little bit to do with pedigree, but really a lot to do with hubs. I mean, I would say 80% of what you'll be evaluated on is quantity and quality of hubs. And I'm surprised how much grants are becoming important too, even as your first job. Just a train grant or an NRSA or K, that plays a role. But do keep in mind that you're going to a master's grant team or an undergraduate from arts college, teaching will be playing a very big role. And some job talks will be a sample lecture that you did, a guest lecture. So of course it varies by university, but that's the rankings I would say.
You guys have anything
You know, when I was in Northwestern as an assistant chair, so part of what I also really wanted to do was evaluate faculty. Did a lot of work on trying to figure out where they fit not just within our department, but in a lot of communities throughout the entire university. So, you know, I'm glad that you mentioned we did say that it won't be a good lecture because they're on top of our and I also would comment that I would have a hard time sending a person to the dean to advocate for a department like the things that they were personable and also were well spoken and things like that. So we really are trying to picture, this is our community, our department is outside our family, and we all want to function as such. So trying to assess that, so trying to all understand that too. So that's another thing that we think about.
No, not been there.
Another question that we had is, so you, in particular, Garth and Tara, you guys both talked about changing institutions. So the soonest decision for many of us will be, should I go on the job market this year? Could I stay in grad school another year, potentially get more certifications? I'm going to go on the job market. Am I going on the job market for postdocs, for faculty, for both? How does one make the decision of when it's time to move on?
I think one of the things that I felt was I had about the field in question, the particular technique we're using, and that's what we all do for our department research too. This person come with kind of a, maybe it was a chapter about what we are trying to look for. It seemed cohesive, it didn't have that as a independent kind of pursuit, but I can understand how they're going to shift. So when you feel like you have something you don't tell people that we started here, we came in the middle, and I feel like I have a question, or I have something to say that's been around things out. How are you doing the job? How are you sort of telling people about what you think that is?
My one, I just have a very small thing, is that I kind of wish, looking back, I raised in graduate school, sort of, and I wish I had taken an extra year just to wait for publications to come out. I don't know if that sounds, if that makes any sense or not. So it might just depend on the job market and how competitive you can be in that market. And so I would recommend, waiting a reasonable amount of time. You don't want to be in your PhD program for years and years. I don't know how to do it either. But waiting an extra year to get more publications, to be more ready. And then, I don't know, I would apply to both jobs and postdocs, but I also very geographically limited, so I would apply to whatever's in that area and see what you get.
Mitch, do you have comments?
Oh, I think it makes sense.
Another question that people were interested in is the role of social technologies in getting a job. Have you guys seen the change in how these factors are playing into the job search and selection?
That helps you. You're old and not tech savvy. They don't think about those things. It's not like a whole job. They can barely walk around.
caveat to that, and that faculty at academic research institutions like that, if you look at something like a research center, a Salk Institute, Cancer Research Center or something, there's a slight difference. Usually I found that because there's more business administration management, like the Salk Institute, yes, they were faculty, but they were in classes, they were graduate students, and there was a business administration HR faculty team that was really, and they knew how to use it at the time, and that was great. So anytime you think about where you're applying for, faculty at the Salk is what the HR person would come down to. So, there, it depends on where you are. And I think, again, if you're doing research in government administration, so there is a lot of opportunity for doing very powerful research in that area. They're very savvy. They understand some of the people who are involved in the hiring decision, not making it, but involved in the hiring decision. They'll know that.
Where are you from?
Now, I'm not very tech savvy myself, but I agree that there might be certain types of departments that might be more interested in seeing what your Twitter feed looks like. So I would be a professional on your Twitter and Facebook environmentation.
Great. We have more questions, but we just kind of wanted to get the ball rolling. Does anyone out there have? Yeah, back in. Yep.
Did you talk about asking the search committee about the search vision for the job offer? I was wondering if it's appropriate to ask about the search vision before you even apply for the job.
Yeah, I think it is. I think that given how inundated some people may be with emails expressing interest in the job, you may or may not get as thorough an answer. So I think that it is fine though, and certainly though, even if you do that before you apply, do it again once you're invited for an interview, because you will likely get a more thorough answer.
Talk a little bit about the pros and cons of postdoc or tenure track position when you graduate. Why
All right, I can answer for this a lot on this. Okay. One reason, well, again, I always advocate for applying for both and then seeing what you get. If you have a fabulous postdoc, you can learn cutting edge research and really great training on apprenticeship, et cetera, versus, assistant professor position at the university. If you're not as excited about it, there aren't opportunities for everyone to interview it. Obviously, then you would want the postdoc. So I would say, really look and see which one's going to set you up well. But I don't know. I mean, if you had both in hand, I would go for the assistant professor position if they were equal. If I felt like I could do the best work at either one. I don't know.
I would say you're very strategic about your postdoc. There's a number of studies show that there's a diminishing return in time in postdoc. It's intended to be about 5. That you might be still doing good work, but younger people are also fun. And it's a very hard body to do. Now remember, I always advocate how long you think it will take, just like the undergraduate.